I'm Jason, and these are my two hands without fingers. This is the most painful and terrifying experience I've ever had. 10 years ago, I was a sophomore at the University of California, San Diego. I spent my free time working as a freelance deliverer. The job was risky, but it offered flexible hours and helped me cover my living expenses. Occasionally, I'd receive extra tips, which always made me excited. I'd been doing this job for nearly a year when that fateful night occurred. On that day, I didn't go to work. Instead, I spent time working on a presentation for the end of a course. I forgot to update my account on the order receiving website to not accepting orders. Around 10 p.m., my account received a notification about a delivery order. Before I could read all the details, my phone rang unexpectedly from an unknown number. I answered, and on the other end was a woman who wanted me to deliver the package to the specified address by midnight. She emphasized that it was 12 midnight and instructed me to be punctual. Before I could respond, the call ended abruptly. Right after that, the delivery fee was transferred to my account. Seeing the amount, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was 10 times more than my usual orders. Immediately, I forgot about the importance of my presentation. I rushed from my dorm to the location where the orders were gathered. On the package, there was an address and a phone number, but no recipient name. I started the delivery at 10:30 p.m. It was an old but spacious house tucked away in a narrow alley. Checking my watch, it was 11:57, and I stood at the door, ready and alert, not daring to waste a single second. As the clock struck midnight, I immediately rang the doorbell. But before the bell stopped ringing, the door of the house swung open. From inside, an elderly woman stepped out, looking at me with indifferent eyes. She was tall, but her skin was wrinkled and dark, with high cheekbones and sunken features, and her hair was disheveled, some parts long, some short. I politely greeted her and handed her the package. When I presented the delivery slip and asked her to sign to confirm the receipt of the package, she hesitated. Instead of signing, she stared at my hand for a moment before speaking in a deep, hoarse voice that startled me slightly. "Would you stay for dinner with me?" "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am, but Without letting me finish, she handed me $100, saying it was a tip. She promised to pay more if I agreed to have dinner with her and assured me it would only take 20 minutes. I agreed, feeling a bit crazy, but that's what I did at the time. I thought she might be very lonely and in need of companionship. Plus, it wouldn't take much time, and I could go home and continue preparing for tomorrow's presentation. Stepping into the house, everything was rather old but clean and orderly. She invited me to sit at the dining table, where food and utensils were already prepared for two. She went into the kitchen to get something. Wanting to break the silence, I asked her name. "Adela," came the short, indifferent reply. I tried asking a few more questions, but she didn't respond, so I fell silent. A moment later, she emerged, placing a pair of scissors and a gun on the table. I was both surprised and puzzled why dinner would require a gun. Adela placed the package on the table and used the scissors to open it. As soon as the last strip of tape was cut and the box was opened, I felt a horrifying regret for agreeing to dinner with her. The package I had delivered turned out to contain human fingers. Adela poured the blood-stained fingers onto her plate and mine. A chill ran down my spine. My skin crawled and my mind reeled in shock. I was too stunned to speak. Adela gripped the gun tightly and began devouring the fingers voraciously. She looked at me and ordered me to eat. Trembling, I lifted the fork and stabbed at a piece of salad near the fingers. I forced a bite of salad into my mouth, suppressing my urge to retch. The metallic stench of blood overwhelmed me, causing my head to spin. I gagged and clamped my mouth shut, sitting in silence as I watched the terrifying woman devour the fingers on the plate. My body was drenched in sweat, shivering uncontrollably, every cell in me trembling. Adela took a tissue to wipe the blood from her mouth just as the table clock unexpectedly chimed loudly. "The 20-minute dinner is over," Adela's terrifying voice echoed. She pulled out $100 and placed it on the table. Adela then initiated another transaction. She said she would pay me $100,000 if I'd let her eat all 10 of my fingers. "These fingers taste too ordinary. Your fingers look tastier," she said. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. This woman was truly insane. I began to feel uneasy, fully aware of everything around me, but I couldn't control my body anymore. I sat there witnessing the whole process of that insane woman eating my fingers one by one, without resistance, pain, or screams. I woke up in the hospital with both hands bandaged. I still couldn't control my body. The doctor informed me that all 10 fingertips had been severed. Blood tests revealed I was poisoned with a toxin that rendered my body in a paralyzed state beyond control. A passerby found me in a dire condition by the roadside and brought me to the hospital. As for Adela, she was found dead in that house, choked on bone fragments lodged in her throat. She was infected with a virus that affected her brain and nervous system due to cannibalism. I abandoned my studies and lost a bright future ahead of me. If only I hadn't been consumed by greed and curiosity. I wish I could forget the horrifying images of that night forever. I am Roger, 39 years old. I've been working as a delivery driver for UPS for 8 years now. The job is quite demanding, requiring me to be physically fit and flexible with my time. But in return, I have a decent income to support my family. One evening, I received an urgent overtime request from management. It was already past 10 p.m., so I quickly changed into my uniform and left home without saying a word to my wife. I arrived at the company at 10:30 p.m. where the manager hurriedly called me over. He was Peter, a kind and cheerful manager, 4 years older than me. Peter handed me a delivery order sheet. Peter was wearing a mask, coughing continuously, and his behavior was quite strange. He said that this delivery was directly assigned by him because it was urgent and very important. However, Peter was running a high fever, so he trusted me to take over this delivery. Before I could read the delivery address, the quantity of goods, or the delivery time, Peter said he had already checked everything for me. I quickly drove to the delivery address without much time to spare. I followed Peter's instructions, eager to get on the road. I would double-check the address while driving. Glancing at the delivery address, I was a bit surprised. It was in Boston, Massachusetts, about 200 kilometers northeast of my current location. The items were cosmetics and dietary supplements. The customer requested delivery within 3 hours. I wondered how important it could be to require delivery at such a late hour. I encouraged myself to try to complete the delivery early and go home to rest. Looking at the clock in the car, it was almost 1 a.m., and I was starting to feel sleepy. I usually have coffee prepared in the car, but that night, it was all gone without me noticing. With no rest stops in sight, I turned up the rock music, hoping it would keep me alert. The loud music didn't make me any more awake, but at least it kept me from getting drowsier. I slowed down a bit to ensure safety. Suddenly, I heard someone, though I couldn't tell if they were whispering, moaning, or crying. It must have been background noise from the song I was listening to, as it spoke of the heartache of a lovelorn boy. I brushed it off and continued driving, searching for a rest stop. After a stretch of Henry Road, I finally came across a rest area. Just as I turned off the music, I heard the sound of dripping water. I startled, thinking about the possibility of the cosmetics encountering an issue. I quickly got out of the car to check the cargo. Luckily, everything seemed fine, probably just my sleepiness getting to me. But these bottles of cosmetics had a strong chemical smell. I went into the convenience store next to the rest area, bought a pastry and a hot coffee. Now I was truly awake. With 80 kilometers left to go, I was confident I could deliver this shipment on time. But then I got lost on a rough dirt road with large rocks causing the car to shake violently. I heard the glass bottles under the trunk clinking against each other, making my heart skip a beat. I'd have to pay a hefty sum if I damaged the customer's goods. The road was too dark. The car hit a large rock and jolted. The sound of breaking glass echoed. On reflex, I hit the brakes, turning back to the trunk with a look of horror on my face. But what I saw next terrified me even more. I saw Peter, my manager, with a pale face, his eyes dripping with blood. I slammed on the brakes as hard as I could, trying to widen my eyes to see clearly, but Peter was gone. The feeling of seeing a ghost doesn't compare to seeing someone you know, but they're in a horrifying state. It took me a few minutes for my stiff body to move again, but my heart was still pounding so hard I could hardly breathe. I panicked, my limbs unsure of what to do to keep driving. I kept pressing the accelerator, the car speeding faster, making me even more frantic. I reached out, pressing every button, the horn, the turn signals, the headlights, but my foot remained firmly on the accelerator. Ahead was a large tree. I was still accelerating, the car reaching speeds of up to 80 kilometers an hour. Luckily, I managed to hit the brakes in time. The car screeched to a halt, the entire force thrusting forward, the cargo compartment echoing with the sound of tearing bags and a series of crashes. I knew I had just caused something horrifying. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I breathed heavily, trying to regain my composure, the strong smell of bleach wafting up from the cargo. I stepped out of the car almost holding my breath, slowly opening the cargo door and shining my flashlight. A mixture of bleach and the metallic smell of blood spilled out from the inside. As I shone the flashlight inside, a man in uniform similar to mine lay amidst numerous bottles and jars, his body covered in blood. As I slowly illuminated the area, I saw blood flowing from his chest, 3 wounds resembling gunshot wounds in the center of his chest. And the most horrifying thing was, he was my manager, Peter. My entire body went limp. I lost the ability to control myself. Even my brain seemed to stop functioning for a few minutes. I don't remember how I managed to return to the driver's seat. It was only after I finished calling the police that I noticed my phone screen was covered in blood and dirt. My hands were scratched, with some fingers even torn with nails. Only then did I feel the pain. When the police arrived, I couldn't remain conscious enough to answer any more of their questions. The horrifying events didn't stop there. My company office was reported to have caught fire that very night. The police suspect that the person I encountered that evening was one of my colleagues at the company pretending to be a manager. He took advantage of my trust, deceived me into taking the body far away, then set fire to destroy all evidence and fled. The police are still searching for the whereabouts of that cold-blooded murderer. I requested a 2-week leave to stabilize my mental state, and afterward, I was promoted to manager by the company. It's been 13 years, but the image of Peter that dark night still haunts me. The killer still hasn't been caught. He could be lurking somewhere, observing my life.
I'm Erica, 18 years old, living in Ohio with my parents and a younger brother. I am really glued to my phone. I can spend hours, even whole days browsing the web. 2 or 3 a.m. is usually when I go to bed every day. And the posture will always be me holding the phone and dozing off. I feel like there's too little time to use my phone during the day. Whenever possible, the only thing I do is sit or lie down and hold my phone. I rarely share my thoughts and difficulties with my parents. Sharing it via text with friends or strangers on social media is easier for me. One day, after having dinner with my parents, I went to my room to do some things and grabbed my phone. I had no one to talk to. I updated a status on my Instagram account. I'm really bored and want someone to talk to. At exactly 3 a.m., when I was about to go to sleep, I received a message from an unknown Instagram account. "You're not sleeping, huh?" I was quite surprised, staring at the message for a few seconds. But thinking about the status I had updated, I thought someone else might be lonely like me. The typing indicator appeared. A few seconds later, another message made me shiver. "Do you know? Demons appear at 3 a.m., accompanied by a red demon face." I felt uncomfortable and immediately blocked that account, wondering who the crazy person was. I continued browsing the web. About 5 minutes later, a message was sent from another strange account. "I will devour you if you dare to do that again." My heart started beating faster. "Don't be scared. I'm just kidding. I'll always be by your side. I'm seeing you very clearly. I can smell your perfume. I really like it." I jumped up reading those creepy messages. Observing around the room, I looked closely at every object, every nook and cranny. I felt scared of the very familiar things I use daily. The sound of a message being sent startled me. "Are you curious to know who I am?" Immediately after, a grotesque picture was sent, and I was so frightened that I dropped the phone on the bed. It took a few seconds to calm down. I went online to search for information about the picture. The Wendigo, a malevolent spirit in Algonquian culture. It's often described as a tall, skinny creature with long, sharp claws. The Wendigo is said to have the ability to transform into a human and eat people. I read every word, and goosebumps covered my body. Something super surprising is going to happen to you. Wait and see. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, beating twice as fast. I looked around. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't good at all. The sound of a message echoed. I hastily picked up the phone. It was a picture in which Thomas, my boyfriend, was dead hanging. I screamed as loudly as I could, trying to release all the fear within me. Surprised, aren't you? I quickly jumped out of bed and rushed towards the door of the room, desperate to call out loudly for my parents' help. Just as my hand reached for the doorknob, the sound of a message echoed again. "I'm behind the door waiting for you. Open the door. Let me taste your blood." My legs went weak, and I collapsed to the floor. I tried to breathe steadily to calm myself down. I dialed my mother's phone, but it couldn't connect. I called my dad, my younger brother, my best friend, but all in vain. By this point, I was so scared that I felt like crying. I was trapped in my own room with a flesh-eating demon. The unbelievable and absurd was happening to me.
"Don't cry. I'm right next to you."
The sound of the message echoed again, and I trembled as I held the phone. Another photo was sent. It was my parents' bedroom, with them lying on the bed asleep. But the figure holding the camera that captured them was eerie, tall and gaunt. Next was a photo of my little brother sleeping. The photographer was so close, yet faceless. In the corner of the image, sharp claws were visible. I felt like I was going mad. I was being tormented and controlled by that demon. Panic, fear, helplessness, everything compressed in my chest as if it were about to explode. The next photo was sent, and it was me, precisely at this moment. I was screaming in agony and despair. Looking around the room, I wanted to find that demon. I shouted angrily and challenged. I wouldn't let that demon control me anymore. A horrifying laughter echoed, and the room was still empty except for me. I searched the room, destroying everything within reach, peering into the smallest corners. Finally, I looked under the bed. There it was, holding the phone with a sinister smile on the face identical to mine, mouth full of sharp teeth.
"I am right next to you. We are one and together. We are residing within one another."
Hello, how may I help you? Please help me. I just shot a man. Could you please explain the situation further? My wife was just attacked by him. Please come here and help me. Do you need ambulance, fire truck, or police car? Yes, I need everything. That was the phone call received at 10 p.m. at our police station. I'm William, 47 years old, working as a police officer in Ohio. That evening, I was on duty with two colleagues. We received a report of a serious assault at a residence about 15 kilometers from the station. Immediately, myself and another colleague moved to that house. Upon arrival, the scene inside the house left us stunned. Under the floor, a man and a woman lay apart from each other. The woman had been attacked, her head severely disfigured. The man had 3 gunshot wounds to his forehead, blood still flowing. Bloodstains covered the floor and walls, yet to dry. The room was in disarray. A man around 40 years old sat on the sofa, holding a trembling and crying little girl about 6 years old. He wore a blood-stained sweatshirt, and his right arm was deeply torn. That was Henry, the husband of the attacked woman, and the one who had called the police. The medical staff began assessing the condition of Henry's wife and the other man. I asked Henry questions to gather information while my colleague observed the scene. Henry was visibly panicked when he saw us arrive. He kept asking if his wife was okay and begged the medical staff to save her. We tried to reassure Henry, promising to do our best, but looking at the grim reality, we knew both his wife and the other man were already dead. After Henry calmed down, he painfully recounted the whole story. Henry's family had a small gym in the basement. That Sunday afternoon, Henry was working out on the treadmill down in the basement. Suddenly, there was a loud noise on the roof. Henry rushed upstairs and called out his wife Martha's name, but she didn't respond. Entering the bedroom, Henry didn't find his wife anywhere, only his 6-year-old daughter lying on the bed. As Henry stepped into the living room, he was suddenly attacked by a man wielding a dirty axe. Reacting quickly, Henry managed to dodge, and the axe swung down hard onto his right arm. Then he saw his wife lying on the floor with a horrified expression. Henry immediately called the police. Henry told us that the man who attacked his wife was named Isaac. I was surprised and asked how he knew the name of the man. Henry said that Isaac had harassed Martha several times before. The man named Isaac, 35 years old, lived in a mobile home and had no relatives other than his girlfriend who lived with him. As Martha's body was being taken away, I noticed that the couple's daughter kept screaming and looking at Henry with hatred in her eyes. The girl seemed like she wanted to run towards us and say something, but was restrained by Henry. He tightly held onto her arm, glaring at her fiercely, but I soon forgot about this detail as I focused on the case. The investigation into Isaac's background revealed prior allegations of domestic violence against women. Everything seemed clear-cut, yet the perpetrator was already deceased and the case was swiftly resolved. He was also acquitted of the murder charge on grounds of self-defense. However, Henry didn't stop there. He kept demanding justice, insisting that Isaac pay for taking Martha's life. Henry was seemingly deeply distraught over his wife's death, leading to some unusual actions. It was a swift but haunting case for me. Until 6 months after the case was closed, the police department received a phone call from a mysterious woman claiming to be a friend of Martha.
911, what's your
She said she wanted to report the real murderer in Martha's case from 6 months prior. Immediately, arrangements were made for her to come to the police station and provide her statement. The girl was Keva. Keva asserted that the person who killed Martha was Henry, Martha's husband. Keva confessed that she and Henry had an affair while Martha was still alive. Henry planned to kill his wife and take possession of Martha's considerable wealth. He secretly investigated and discovered that Martha was having an affair. The daughter he cherished so much was actually the daughter of his wife and her lover. Henry shared his plan with Keva, hoping she would cooperate with him, but Keva adamantly refused. After being rejected by Keva, Henry shifted his focus to the man Isaac to manipulate him and frame him for the crime. Henry's plan unfolded perfectly according to what he had calculated. After Martha's death, he sold the house and bought a new one, living comfortably with the money he inherited from his wife. Keva revealed that she had wronged Martha by being involved with Henry. However, her conscience would never allow her to commit murder. Keva underwent psychological treatment for many months to be able to speak the truth. She urged us to quickly apprehend Henry because he might harm Martha's daughter. We arrived at the address provided by Keva and witnessed Martha's daughter being abused by a strange woman. The girl, with a face resembling her late mother's, cried loudly and begged for forgiveness from the unknown woman. Shortly after, Henry returned home and appeared shocked to see us. The cold-blooded man was living off the money of his deceased wife, along with his lover, who was 20 years younger than him. The case was reinvestigated, and Henry was sentenced to death for the first-degree murder. His accomplice received a 7-year prison sentence for child abuse. After everything, the one who suffered the most severe damage was still Martha's daughter.
I'm Natalie, living in Queens, New York. I've been orphaned since childhood, living with my grandmother and aunt. They're the only family I've known. Since elementary school, I've been close with Laura, who lives just a block away from me. Laura has a similar background to mine. Her father abandoned her and her mother when Laura was 4. By the time she was 10, her mother left Laura with her grandparents and remarried. Laura and I grew up together, considering each other as sisters. I have a strong personality, while Laura is very feminine. Both of us lacking affection, we deeply cherish and support each other. When we went to college, Laura and I decided to attend the same university. By sophomore year, Laura met a guy named Kane. Kane is 2 years older than us, with a somewhat eccentric appearance. He's tall and very skinny. His pale white skin made him look frail and delicate. His brown hair always hung long and somewhat disheveled. Kane had multiple piercings on his ears, nose, lips, chin, and eyebrows. Living alone, he never mentioned or met any of his relatives. Kane and Laura quickly fell in love after just 1 month of knowing each other. When Laura told me she had accepted Kane's confession of love, I was genuinely surprised and somewhat disappointed. I didn't like Kane for some reason. I just didn't feel fond of him. Many times I caught his eerie and intimidating gaze towards Laura, but I had no right to interfere in her personal life. Laura's grandmother also advised her several times to be careful and vigilant with Kane. After 3 months of dating, Laura and Kane announced their engagement, shocking everyone. Laura was so deeply in love with Kane that she brushed off the warnings. They moved to the house that Kane rented previously in the neighboring town after getting married. Laura missed out on her studies, choosing to stay at home and do household chores. At first, she would often come back to visit. We went out together, and Laura would talk about married life with Kane with an extremely happy face. Seeing Laura happy, I gradually started to trust her decision. But Laura's visits gradually became less frequent. Her messages and calls to me also decreased. Even when I sent her messages for days, Laura would only reply briefly. The happy photos Laura shared with her husband on her personal account slowly turned into posts filled with hidden emotions. Once, when I visited Laura, she looked visibly thinner. She led me into the house and I greeted Kane cheerfully. He responded with an extremely cold tone, not even looking at me. Kane looked at Laura with a threatening gaze. He said he had to go out for something and would be back in the afternoon. As soon as Kane left, Laura burst into tears when I asked how she was doing. She cried a lot for a long time. I hugged Laura, trying to comfort her. Although Laura didn't share anything, I knew she wasn't happy. In the following weeks, Laura kept posting images of herself on her social media. In these photos, Laura's facial features appeared familiar yet strangely different. Her eyes seemed soulless, gazing into an undefined space. What stood out was that all the photos had the same expression, no longer radiating the bright and innocent smile as before. Through these images, I noticed Laura becoming increasingly unfamiliar. I also noticed the tattoo on her neck had disappeared. I wondered if that was really Laura. One evening around 11 o'clock, I received a phone call. Natalie, I'm scared. I just had a dream about Laura. She said she was having trouble breathing. Her face was distorted, limbs broken. I couldn't reach Laura anymore. Laura's grandmother cried and begged me to find Laura. I immediately tried to contact her but also couldn't reach her. With a sense that something terrible had happened, I immediately reported to the police in the town where Laura and Kane lived. When the police arrived at the house, both Laura and Kane were missing. The house was empty, devoid of any belongings. In the bedroom, they found a sex doll sitting on the bed. It looked exactly like Laura. The doll was still very new and appeared to have been cleaned before being left behind. The house was clean too, with no signs or personal belongings left behind. Through the street security cameras, the police couldn't find any trace of Laura and Kane for the past 10 days. They had vanished. Upon closer inspection of the images Laura had posted before disappearing, it wasn't Laura, but the doll that had been found. Where had they gone? The doll was sent back to Laura's grandmother by the police. She cried a lot. The doll seemed to remind her even more of Laura. Nearly a year passed, but news about Laura and Kane remained a mystery. I often visited Laura's grandmother. She cherished the doll and placed it in Laura's former bedroom, as if Laura still existed in this house. Looking at the doll, I truly wondered, what was its purpose? Why did everything in Laura's house disappear except for it? Suddenly, I noticed a pair of the doll's arms seemed to be sticking out. There was something sharp inside, about to puncture the outer layer of the doll's skin. Laura's grandmother and I decided to cut the doll's arm to see what was inside. As the knife sliced through, the doll's arm split open along a long seam. From within, a decaying human hand emerged along with the slimy silicone material. The smell of plastic and decay filled the air heavily. Laura's grandmother was in shock, clutching her chest and screaming before collapsing. I led her out of the living room and locked Laura's room, then called the police. After examination, the police determined that the body inside the sex doll was Laura's. The cause of Laura's death could not be determined. No words can describe the pain and panic of Laura's grandmother at that moment. For the past 8 years, Kane has been on the run, with warrants issued throughout the United States and some neighboring countries. But they have never found any leads. Even his personal information is not on the national management system. I always remember Laura, my sweet and warm-hearted girl.